We've made a good start on turning the gobbledygook of federal regulations into plain English that people can understand. But we know that we still have a long way to go. We brought together parts of 11 different government agencies to create a new Department of Energy. And now it's time to take another major step by creating a separate Department of Education.
These words were spoken by President Jimmy Carter at his 1978 State of the Union address, less than a year before he created the Department of Education. At the time, education was a national priority after a slew of reforms pushing equality of access to education passed in the 1970s. With the Department of Education forming a national response and a way to guide and reinforce the educational standards of the country, hopes were high that future generations of American children would be taught to lead our country to new heights. But over 45 years later, America faces a new reckoning with education. As technology has expanded and the country has faced new challenges, education has fallen to the side, and each state now leads itself into an uncertain future. But there are many things to cover before we can explain how we got here, where we are, and what we do now. For that, we can start in the 2000s.
I hope you can tell that education is dear to my heart. I care a lot about whether or not our children can learn to read, write, and add and subtract. When I was the governor of Texas, I didn't like it one bit. When I'd go to schools in my state and realize that children were not learning so they could realize their God-given potential.
Come the turn of the millennium, with the Cold War fading into memory and a new generation of children growing into a new age of digital connectivity, it was decided that education was yet again an issue in need of national attention. To address this, President George W. Bush would create a new educational policy now known infamously as No Child Left Behind. Passing Congress on January 8, 2002, the No Child Left Behind Act introduced a new level of federal involvement in education. Creating a new national academic standard, schools would be required to test students each year to monitor their success at adhering to the aforementioned new standards. For more information about No Child Left Behind, we turn now to an education professional.
I am Dr. Amy Catalano. I am a professor of teaching, learning, and technology at Hofstra University. I am also the interim dean of the School of Education at Hofstra University. The idea behind No Child Left Behind was to allow all children to be represented and to be proficient in their education. So it was an accountability measure. It required standardized tests. It required high teacher quality. It also wanted to ensure that children with disabilities and also children who are English language learners would perform at the same proficiency levels as all students.
Schools were given 12 years to achieve 100% proficiency in reading and math.
The issue with the No Child Left Behind Act was that all students were not able to be identified as proficient. So no state was able to identify 100% of students as proficient.
As a result, while struggling students would see more success in the following years, overall achievement would not reach as high as before. National response to the failings of No Child Left Behind would first come in 2009 with Bush's successor, President Barack Obama. Coming directly from the start of the Great Recession of 2008, the beginning of Obama's first term consisted of a form of national cleanup and damage control. In 2009, Obama would sign the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, and it was off the back of that bill that he would find a slight amount of money to put towards assisting education. The Race to the Top initiative would be created.
The Race to the Top initiative was kind of a competition among states to compete for funds to make sure that children were excelling beyond proficiency. So STEM initiatives in particular, high quality teacher training, initiatives to that extent.
At the same time, many states would be let off the hook for failing to achieve the proficiency levels mandated by No Child Left Behind. But Race to the Top would not be a permanent solution.
That's why we're here today. This is an early Christmas present. After more than 10 years, members of Congress from both parties have come together to revise our national education law. A Christmas miracle, a bipartisan bill signing right here. So today I'm proud to sign a law that's going to make sure that every student is prepared to succeed in the 21st century.
By the mid-2010s, the country looked completely different from when No Child Left Behind had originally passed in 2002. As Obama's second term came to a close, it was clear that it was yet again time to reconfigure how we dealt with education on a national level. The next stage in our national education policy came in 2015 when Obama would pass the Every Student Succeeds Act.
The Every Student Succeeds Act was President Obama's initiative to end No Child Left Behind, and it was a similar initiative all across history in an attempt to increase students' performance.
While schools would still be required to test, monitor, and report students annually, a new option was given to opt out of the national standardized tests, and states were given new freedom to choose their own policy goals, so long as they address certain requirements. With the Department of Education remaining in a position of oversight, we would enter a new era of academic practices that would propel our education back into a position of respect and success, and prepare our children to inherit the country. Or so we thought.
Our campaign represents the long-awaited chance to break with the bitter failures of the past and to embrace a new and strong American future. There's no failed policy more in need of urgent change than our government-run education monopoly, and you know in the back that's exactly what it is.
In 2016, against all expectations, Donald Trump would win the election to become the 45th President of the United States of America. It was during his first term that we would see a failure to act in developing our national education system, with most of his actions being either blocked by Congress or only serving to undo previous efforts from the Obama era.
During the first term, President Trump promised to slash funding. He didn't slash as much funding as he's doing at this particular term. He also put in charge Betsy DeVos, who all she really ended up doing was consolidating a few departments, but didn't do as much slashing as that in the budget as they had hoped to do. So there was minimal damage from that move. Betsy DeVos did not have any background in education, so that comes with it, with ignorance comes with its own implied and explicit harm.
There were two notable moments under Trump, however. First, he would rescind accountability for the Every Student Succeeds Act, essentially removing the federal government's ability to direct educational policy. But the second important educational bill would be in response to a growing issue in the United States.
We have breaking news now for you on the West Coast. You are seeing here a map of Connecticut.
Terrifying scene at a Dallas high school, gunfire inside the school.
A deadly school shooting in Tennessee.
The site today of a mass shooting, and this time gunfire aimed at elementary school children.
For decades, America has been dealing with the rise of school shootings. While many important factors have played into the national proliferation of school shootings, just as important is the lasting impact on the state of our educational system they have left. A study in 2018 by the Pew Research Center found the majority of students were worried about a shooting happening at their school, and this new everyday fear has not been unaccompanied.
The most pressing issues probably have emanated from the increase in use of social media by children and adolescents, major increases in mental health issues, and also learning loss after the pandemic.
In the years since No Child Left Behind, a new force has appeared online and in the lives of children and adults across the nation: social media. While it has not been definitively shown that increased social media use leads to depression, it is clear that both social media use and depression rates have expanded dramatically within the past 2 decades. The government did not fail to notice these developments, but it would ultimately fail to solve them. In March of 2018, Congress under Trump would pass the Stop School Violence Act. instead of serving to rework educational standards or guidelines like the ESSA or NCLB Act, the STOP Act would serve a role similar to Obama's Race to the Top, providing monetary grants to schools in order to deal with increasing school violence via training, warning systems, and similar programs. Encouraging threat identification and reporting over tackling the core causes of our school shooting epidemic would mean that the act would ultimately fail to reduce incidents of school violence, and in fact, cases of school shootings would increase dramatically yet again post-2020, a year that would bring about the most dramatic shift in American life in a generation.
Now to growing concerns about the deadly coronavirus.
The World Health Organization has officially called it COVID-19.
Heightened states of emergency across the nation as a number of coronavirus cases soars above 3,000.
The fields are empty, the playgrounds deserted, and all across the United States, school buildings sit empty.
2020 was the year the world shut down, and schools were not spared from the stay-at-home orders and pandemic restrictions. Schools were forced to find ways to deal with not having access to classrooms and having instruction limited to online meetings. The effects of the pandemic will not be fully understood for years to come, but it is safe to say that education suffered greatly for the years that classroom learning was restricted. A social system that had been stuck in a tug-of-war between in-person and on social media became limited purely to the realm of the online, and the long-term impacts on social development cannot yet be known. But like after the Great Recession, pandemic recovery would lead to a new influx of cash to schools.
Our children are the kite strings upon which our national ambitions are lifted aloft. And your profession helps them believe they can do anything.
Under President Joe Biden, 2022 would see two academic spending bills pass Congress. First, in March, the Stand-Up Act would be passed, standing for suicide training and awareness nationally delivered for universal prevention. The Stand-Up Act would aim to help remedy some of the issues that had been brewing among the youth, having been only exacerbated by the pandemic. Then, in June, the bipartisan Safer Communities Act would pass as well, delivering money to schools in response for many of the same issues, like $500 million for school-based mental health services and $500 million for mental health staff and counselors, as well as $300 million in additional funding for the Stop School Violence Act. However, it would become clear that Biden's pouring of money into schools would not solve any of the core issues, and do a poor job at remedying the immediate impacts as well. While the country struggled to recover from the pandemic, educational policy continued to flounder and sink under the weight of new issues. So now that we understand what has happened nationally to bring us to where we are today, we must look closer to see how these developments have impacted the students and teachers. And to do so, we will get help from an educator from New York State.
My name is Brandon Crofts. I am a math and computer science teacher at Oceanside High School, and I have worked there for 4 years.
Do you think New York handles education well?
My immediate question would be objectively or comparatively? Comparatively, I'd say absolutely. I think we have one of the strongest education systems in the country. Objectively, I just think there's always room for improvement. I think we do a lot of things pretty well. We afford our students a lot of opportunities. I'm also biased being a teacher on Long Island, where a lot of affluent neighborhoods are present, and we have the resources to give our students things. But I would say on the most part, I think New York State does most things pretty well. And I'm also appreciative that it seems as though New York State is looking into reshaping what it means to be a New York State graduate and reimagining what should happen in high school. So I am hopeful that those changes will make New York State an even better place to learn and to teach in.
New York State ranks 39th in school shootings per capita. How much do you worry about school shootings?
I think about school shootings more often than most non-education professionals would assume, but I think about just dangerous people being in our building. I think about dangerous people being in the community, the differences between a lockdown drill versus a lockout drill. And there have been times when, the students are almost, they're so good when it comes to the drills. But the fact that we have to have the drills at all is incredibly anxiety provoking. Like living through this age of drills and preparation makes me concerned every year. As we go through, something I tell my students every year is the most popular thing that I would surmise every school says after a school shooting is, they would never think it was them. Like, no school thinks that they're about to experience tragedy, but all these schools have. So like, is 39th better than 23rd? Sure. But ideally on the national level, it would be nice if we could just plummet these numbers to zero. So in short, do I think about school shootings? Yes. I would say a handful of times a year it crosses my mind.
How do you feel about the introduction of generative AI into the classroom?
Sure. So when I think about generative AI as an introduction of a new technology in comparison to, say, the introduction of the internet, the introduction of Wikipedia, I will say, like, there's always this peak anxiety of worry, and then there's this over restriction of things that tend to happen. Like, oh, you can't use the internet for your work. And then eventually it gets allowed. Oh, you can't use Wikipedia as a source. But then we see that, oh, you can probably start there. It's a decent way to start. I imagine there'll be a similar wave. And right now we're hopefully past the over restriction phase. I believe when it first came out, the New York City school system said hard ban, we're not doing it at all. We're not engaging in generative AI. I'll say in my school district, we do choose to pay for a K-12 generative AI subscription called Magic School AI that we allow students to use.
Governor Hochul has said she plans to restrict phone usage in schools. What do you think about policies restricting cell phone use?
So, in general, what do I think about policy regarding cell phone use in schools? I would say cautiously, I am for it. I am for it because I believe fundamentally cell phones are a distraction for students. So to remove cell phones would make my job easier, I think.
What makes teaching in New York special compared to other states?
That we're valued, unlike what happens in some other states, which is a comical answer, but also a legitimate one. I have never felt unvalued by my state, if that makes any sense. There are some times where you get off the phone call with a parent and you're like, oh man, I don't know if they understand what I do every day. But when you read some of the headlines nationally about what goes on in other parts of the country, where you see teachers needing to fight tooth and nail for every little penny. And so I guess teaching in New York is special because I feel as though my work is appreciated by the people who get to see it.
Today we take a very historic action that was 45 years in the making. In a few moments, I will sign an executive order to begin eliminating the federal Department of Education once and for all.
Those were the words spoken by Donald Trump on March 20th, 2025, moments before signing an executive order outlining his plans to close the Department of Education.
Most educators are very concerned about Donald Trump's attempt to end the Department of Education for many reasons. The biggest reasons are there's concerns about funding for student loans for colleges, that's going to cause a lot of chaos for families, especially those who might be expecting Pell Grants. Of concern to teachers in K-12 realms, we're concerned about students with disabilities having access to appropriate education.
While it is unclear the extent to which President Trump is able to actually discontinue the activities of the department, our national education continues to be stuck in a state of limbo. Even if the Department of Education remains operational, we are well overdue for a new attempt at national education reform, something that will clearly not happen under Trump's second term. With the fall of No Child Left Behind and the failure of the ESSA to create any significant lasting change, the power has been left in the hands of the states. Luckily, some states have begun to use this decision-making ability to push policy in the right direction. In 2023, Florida would become the first state to ban cell phone use in schools. In the following years, more states have followed suit, and now a total of 15 states have some form of ban or limitation on cell phone use in schools. In many ways, the Department of Education served to unite the country in pushing our education to greater heights by giving everyone an equal chance to succeed. Each child, regardless of disability or disadvantage, should be given a chance to learn and succeed, for this will lead to a better life for everyone. Similarly, national education policy has aimed to help the schools in most dire need of assistance to provide better education, regardless of state. We find ourselves now in a world where empathy is a commodity and equity is an ideal to fight for, rather than a groundwork to build upon. Perhaps leaving academic policies in the hands of the states will benefit some students. Already we can see a disparity in schooling depending on the state, but this is not what we should be aiming for. In a united country, we cannot let some fail just because others are not. We must build a system that betters the entire nation for the benefit of us all. And I believe, with attention and passion, we can. As Jimmy Carter said,
"Although government has its limits and cannot solve all our problems, we Americans reject the view that we must be reconciled to failures and mediocrity or to an inferior quality of life. For I believe that we can come through this time of trouble stronger than ever."
The best part of being an educator is getting to impact students' lives. Even though I don't teach in a K-12 classroom anymore, I still teach classes and I enjoy seeing my students. I enjoy helping them. I enjoy solving problems. Sometimes it's difficult. You don't always solve people's problems or you can't always reach a child, but it's the effort there that you know that they're going to go on and take what you've taught them and apply it to hopefully to goodwill in the future.
Like the word that keeps popping in my head is growth. Like watching students grow is something I appreciate, especially when, like as a math or computer science teacher, you meet a student in 9th grade and they're this relatively, comparatively immature student who walks in from middle school not knowing much about how to navigate the high school setting, and then by the time they get to their senior year, what I'm seeing now, this is my 4th year, so we have my freshmen have become seniors from year 1 to 4. They're now growing up, they're moving on to college or moving on to the life after high school, and just watching them mature as time goes on is probably the coolest part of my job.